USDA has surprised everybody on their surface estimates, and here to comment that is Jerry Gidel from Midland Research, speaking from Chicago, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, I think the USDA caught everybody by surprise last week with their new report on Wednesday. And do you think what do you think is behind the corn and especially the soybean surface estimate?
Well, I think the one thing that come into this market is that uh, that people got really enamored with the timing of the Chinese purchases earlier this month, but they really were potentially a little bit after some of the early results of the producer survey that was out here in that. And to some extent, if you think about the price action over the last, 6 or 8 weeks here, we had been a little bit sideways back and forth. That doesn't mean that U.S. farmers don't appreciate planting corn. They do, and that. But I think uh, the enthusiasm of the recent cash prices and futures prices got people believing that we were going to move up substantially from that 92 million that the USDA had in their outlook back in February, but wasn't the case. And that also, I think some of the other things have impacted the U.S. The high fertilizer costs that have come up here since the first of the year. With the fact we first had two batches of Chinese corn purchases in that from there, and so it's a scenario where this market is, I think, a little ahead of itself. But the interesting twist is that the biggest surprise was really on beans. Everybody was looking for a substantial increase in numbers here, even above they actually come up with the average as 90 million that the USDA had, but that was up from the fall number of 89 and boy, I think the one key feature this year in the producers' response to the USDA planning statistics is the fact that they, I think, were a little more reluctant to count all their acres that there is in prevent planning and feel like it's all going to get back into production. And we have about 10 million acres supposedly was still in there from the big disaster of 2 years ago with extreme wet conditions, and that we had about 4.5 to 5 million up in the northern plains. We had about 2 million in the over in the Delta areas there south of St. Louis, and then some in the western parts of the plains, and then scattered around from there. And so I think we have seen some good response from what was in the USDA statistics of individual state expectations for corn and soybeans for the Dakotas. Both the combined states of South and North Dakota are now both expecting to see about 2 million increase in both corn and beans. And that really fits the bill, but haven't seen that in the Delta, haven't seen that in other areas. And I think to some extent, if you look at the total number of acres that the U.S. plantings are, they're still, well, in reality, about half of that 10 million still
Yeah,
hasn't decided where it's going to be.
I wonder about the southern states because from the USDA Ag Outlook, there was a shift from corn to from cotton, sorry, to corn and soybeans. But where are those acres right now?
Oh, the weather is not helping these people in the Delta. They're soaked down there. I know that they don't have their situation in and plantings in that. It's kind of tricky. People say, well, it's the South. It doesn't make any difference. There's no frost, this kind of stuff. but their tradition is that they like to get a lot of their corn in. Geez, the March 15th. We're kind of already past that. I think they'll plant corn up to maybe April 15th, and that. The key is it's the heat, the sustained temperatures for corn. When you get temperatures in the mid 90s to 100 on a consistent basis, that hurts the pollen, hurts the potential. So that's one of the issues why corn is that's why they want to get it planted early down there. Also probably the biggest surprise, in my opinion, of the planting numbers was the million extra acres of winter wheat plantings that showed up in the total number here. That's highly unusual to see an adjustment like that from the January winter wheat seedings number to the March planting intentions. And that, interestingly enough, 700,000 of those acres are in Texas. 100,000 was in Colorado. We had another 50,000, I think, Montana. And that's so 850,000 of that 1 million was in 3 states. And we already had a 600,000 increase in the number in Kansas in the previous number. And so, interestingly enough, I guess that's another part of this feature of why some of these acres weren't in corn and soybeans, because Kansas has been a state that's had a lot of corn and soybean increases over the last 5 to 7 years. They're kind of unchanged, maybe even a little lower, I think, on corn by a bit, because they're going to plant more sorghum down there because of the dry conditions that particular crop adapts to, and the fact that up until 2 or 3 weeks ago, we really had a pretty dry outlook for the Western Plains in the U.S. So, well, there's lots of dipsy doodles back and forth on these plantings. So that's really when the part of the reason why that we're kind of looking out the door saying, well, why aren't these guys planting? But the biggest problem becomes is that a combination of weather in the Delta and adjustments in previous plantings and things like that. And interestingly enough, even in the Northern Plains, there's a big increase in canola up that direction because of the strong veg oil prices and in general, soybeans in general. So there's other ways of skinning the cat on these things. So it doesn't always have to be corn and soybeans.
Yes, and do you think the market so far has reacted accordingly?
Well, interestingly enough, we had the kind of whisper campaign that came into the report here on Wednesday. And we really kind of hammered things with people decided, I'm going to be out of this thing. These stock reports are weird, and the corn number is going to be too high, and the soybean situation, that kind of stuff. And then we had the great set of numbers yesterday. And these are new crop numbers. They were the major strength of yesterday's report was the fact that we're 2.1 million less than expected in corn and 2.4 million less in beans. So a combined effort like that, a total number of acres being missed by the 2 major crops. I can't remember. I think I started looking for a number like that in the last 20 years that we've had that big of adjustments both downward and combined between the two. And there's been situations where corn's been up 2 million, beans have been down 2 million. Those kind of things, but having both of them down like that is definitely a factor. Now, I think that's part of the reason why we had some of our reactions to here the day going into the Easter holiday here in the U.S. With a 3-day weekend. I think some people decided that, the old crop is still important, and new crop could still change between now and June, and so. Once the soybean market didn't make a new high above its 1460 May, that market has really been a roller coaster, and today was another example.
And has the wheat price surprised you?
Not really. We've to some extent, there's been a lot of people doing cross spreads with wheat really being the negative and that. And so if corn's a little turned in a little weaker performance, or beans, they're getting some reactions. I think part of the big reactions in soybeans today was the fact that the old new crop bean spread, which is a very prominent speculative scenario, big prominent factor in the commercial world, and that it's a way of kind of moving your money around. Plus, at the same time, it's been one of those things that people use to try to compensate for their basis changes in that. And when the numbers on Wednesday really favored soybean, new crop soybeans in that versus, I don't know that the numbers were negatives, old crop. They just weren't, to some extent, they weren't the story. The story was new crop. And then once we didn't make a new high in the May overnight, then all of a sudden today we just had a hefty liquidation. And sometimes in there we were down 25 cents in that spread. And that's pretty unusual to have that big a liquidation in it. And that I still think that there's still a real need to do some price rationing on soybeans here between now and September. There's still a lot of U.S. Soybean crush demand that needs to be sourced. And at this point, we're only 15 million away from the USDA's projection of 2.25 billion bushels with today's export sales. That's 15 million, and we have, let's say, a quick figure, 22 or 23 weeks left in the year. That's that means we're talking about, actually, in some cases, we probably suggest that we need to see high enough prices to import some beans from our friends in Brazil.
Yeah, I was going to mention South America right now. I think the South America weather talk is a thing of the past for considering we changed the subject totally right now with these new reports.
Oh, the U.S. reports have taken front and center here. I do think that Argentina's weather situation, they've had some showers. There's projection of showers coming back next week. Their crop is kind of spread out over a little longer period of time. So I think things have been hurt, but I don't think it's going to substantially change it from now. And the soybean side of things, the big question on that situation in Brazil is, what is the quality and how many of those bushels might have been spoiled because of this very, very wet condition? Now, it's changed dramatically over the last 10 days or so. And we've had dry weather this last week, and we're projected to have dry weather next week. And so the twist of that is it's now got everybody thinking about what does that mean for the second crop corn, and will it get good weather to get all the way through mid to late May, where it really does need because of the late plantings this year. And so I think there's still one little area down there that's quite important to the world prices, and that's going to be the safrinha corn in Mato Grosso. If the weather turns, in essence, to the dry season late April and things don't continue on enough to get through pollination some of these crops and get the fill started, it could be an interesting situation. I know the 109 million might only be, it might not take only 10 million out of it, but 10 million metric tons of corn this year could make a big difference in the total world supply. And so that's the one feature in the South America that I think is highly important on this thing as we watch going forward. But next week's numbers on the USDA's are going to be front and center as we look into the next week.
And what are you expecting right now?
Well, on the corn side of things, minimum 200 million increase in exports. Just no other way around it. We're at 2.6. We're like 2.55 on our sales at this point. That 200 million kind of matches the 170 million the Chinese bought. There's people want to talk about it being as high as 300 million. There's 30 billion, I should say, 33 billion versus 200 versus 2.8, which I just talked about. Boy, that was tough. Anyway, That's possible, I guess, but I guess the key that would be if something went a little bit bad in Mato Grosso and that second crop corn turned weak again or an output under stress. But 200 million, that takes us to 1.3 carryovers, billion carryover stock versus the current 1.5. The other twist in this thing is that the feed demand numbers that were out in the it's an implied demand that comes out of the quarterly stocks reports in that, and we total up how much crushes. Excuse me, how much is ethanol usage, how much is exports, and then we figure out how much is left in our pot by the stocks, and that is what our feed demand is because you can't really make that calculation because some corn does never hit an elevator or comes out of a farmer to a feed yard or stuff like that. That all being said, that number was a little less than expected, and I kind of feel like that the interesting thing is that the first half demand this year on corn, we had a record fall usage. This wasn't a record level for this winter, but the total up to 2 is 74% of the USDA projection. There's only been one other year. I think it was 2010-11 that we had a 75% usage factor, and that turned around and didn't get any tighter the rest of the year. So that could be a factor in here, but I'd have to say that the USDA could easily increase that the feed demand by 50. So there you go, 250 off. And that's putting it down there very close to, I think, the magic number of 1.2 billion on corn.
So those are your bold forecasts.
Well, I think that's what I see on the corn. The soybean side is really an interesting one. USDA is dancing with things there. You got crush that's been doing good. This last month was kind of got beat up because of the weather and that, but then on the export side, as we talked about, we're only 15 million away. I kind of feel like that they're going to increase both of those maybe by 10 million. But the one thing they can do is take a 10 million out of their residual. It's at 22 million. You take it down to 12. I've seen the USDA over the years do some very creative things with residuals and imports and things like that. They don't tend to end up taking their carryover stock substantially below 100, and particularly the one time we were, I think, or two that were under 100 was the fact it was the last number and that was what's left, and that wasn't because the USDA put that number in the supply demand mark. But you think about it, if we go 5 to 10 lower, that still keeps things very taut in the old crop side of things, and I think that's a feature. Wheat, I think the one kind of twist on that one is that these exports just continue to be a lackluster here, and I kind of feel like they'll increase that, increase the carryover stock by 20 and decrease exports by 20 on that. So the interesting thing is when you take 250 million out of that corn number, or you take 10 or 15 million out of beans and put those on the beginning numbers, and the fact that we had less plantings, boy, you don't put much enthusiasm for a good. It puts you. Your enthusiasm is the fact that it is so tight and everything is going to be watched so closely, and that now we won't see any USDA numbers officially until May, but they're going to be a highly anticipated situation in that we've already got the USDA's outlook numbers from February. They've showed pretty basic demand. No, they didn't shave a lot off of these things. To some extent, we probably need some stronger prices to shave some demand off, or we need to end up having fantastic weather in the U.S. This whole crop season, and actually having a corn yield that's above 176.6. I think it's the best we ever done. And on beans, we got to do something like 51.9. So both those numbers need to be surpassed big time, and we haven't done it the last couple of years.
Yes, it seems that 2021 is being an unusual year like 2020.
Oh, it's going to be just as wild. Of course, our main player China and this thing at this point, they've had some ups and downs in their their African swine fever issues over there. But I also think that they are also looking at trying to build up supplies and feed situations and that. I don't see them being a major and all of a sudden disappear on us. Part of it's because of the agreement they signed. They still have a tremendous amount of commitments for this coming 21 year. And I think that'll carry through all the 22. The big question is that on a longer term basis, hopefully we can get some better understanding between the two countries as we go forward. And we don't have to go through this annual issue about exports and imports between the two.
Okay, we'll check back your estimates next week. And thank you, Jerry, again for your interview.
Yeah, excuse me. All of a sudden, now my voice is wore out here on the end of the week. But anyway, thanks again, Louis, and look forward to speaking with you next week.